there are all these different systems of individual differences, which I've briefly mentioned before, called the gunas. And you see the predicament. Now, here we are thinking we're trying to get enlightened, or thinking we are on a path. In that case, we are still identified with that of us which is in prakriti, or in nature. We are identified with the gunas. Later on, meditation or whatever, gotten rid of it, so that we're absolutely quiet, without any models, then all of our action and all of our form of manifestation will still be within the gunas and still be within our karmic uniqueness, but no longer will we be ruled by them. We will, in fact, be free of them, but we will function through them because it is our vehicle. It's like the more enlightened I get, I don't grow more hair in my head. It's still going away, just going away, Maybe I'll get some yogic siddhi at some point that I can grow hair back. But no matter how conscious I get, then I'll be a conscious bald man instead of an unconscious bald man, right? In other words, I'll take what's given and work with it, but it'll be easier for me to work with it because I won't be stuck in it so deeply. And what you use these analysis of individual differences for, see, there are many levels of using all this stuff. You use them in order to get free of a lot of ways in which you've been holding on to who you think you are all the time. Because most of the way in which our egos are structured from inside out, from inside you out, are a lot of sort of half-cooked, half-conceptual, emotional kinds of models about who you aren't and what a jerk you are and how you're never going to make it and how ugly you are and, all that stuff just lurking, sort of smoldering, in a very unclean way, not dirty, but uncrisp. And a lot of times category systems help you get free of other systems you've been using that you're in so deep, and they're such subtle habits that you can't get any leverage on them. So that in psychology, for example, you use the Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory. And you get so that you look at everybody as a high PD or a hysteric or a MF or whatever it is, and you draw profiles of them, and, I know who you are. You're a clear, PD, and it's all done in terms of psychodynamics, which is based on pathology. Like, nobody's really normal. It's all just how sick you are. It's the chart of how sick you are. There are other personality inventories that are more, perhaps, humane about humans. The Rorschach is a more subtle one. And each of those will give you a whole new take of yourself. Then you get to the astral plane, and of course you have your astral sign, and that gives you a whole other take. And it's incredible how much you clean up your game by knowing your astral configuration, which has as much scientific validity as any other system of individual differences. It is all relatively true. It's like Newtonian physics. It is true within a limited condition. Who you are is way beyond all these individual differences, but who you think you are is well within the individual differences. And you got to deal with where you start from, not where you're going to end up, no matter how much you'd like to. There's another system that is a familiar one to many of you, which is the chakras. That works within an energy framework. And the traditional 7 chakras of the body, starting with the Muladhara, ending up with a Sahasrara, you can roughly psychologically equate these chakras with the first one, which is at the bottom, sort of halfway between the anal sphincter and the genitals, right in that area, is primarily connected with survival. The second chakra, which translates as her favorite resort, which is referring to the kundalini as it comes up, and that's the sexual chakra, sort of like the Riviera. And the third chakra, which is around the midsection, could be thought of as connected with ego power. And the fourth chakra connected with compassion, the anahata. And the fifth chakra, the Suddha, connected with turning inward towards God, and with the voice, and with divine sound coming through. And the sixth chakra, which is the ajna, which is up here, connected with the guru, the third eye, that whole realm. And the seventh chakra, the 1,000-petal lotus, is the merging into the Brahman, right? And if you are sophisticated in that, if you read John Woodruff and things like that, and you're sophisticated in the chakra systems, then you begin to assess your own predicament, and you say, well, a lot of my energy is my fourth chakra's opening. See, I can work in the chakra systems a little bit, and so somebody comes to see me, and I'm sitting there looking at them, and suddenly what I see is a chakra chart. And I see various chakras like sending out lights saying, bzz, 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 like, you know, compassion, 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 lust, 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 you know, power, power, power. Or you look and suddenly the heart thing is nothing's coming through, you know, but the head is this like beam, it's like Zapsville, right? And you get so that you can look in chakra terms at yourself and others and say, well, the energy is coming here, but it's still pretty blocked there, and because it doesn't open nice and neat, like you finish with the first, now we'll go to the second, you finish with the second. Everybody's got a little of everything going. And part of what the whole process of meditating, when you do meditations with energy, is you meditate up in the higher parts of your body and you bring the energy up. There is another energy type of meditation where you meditate on your hara, or the place below your navel, which is focusing on where the locus of the energy center is in your body, and you start from where that is and you become identified with that, and then it moves. Then there are ways of working with energy. See, these are all methods we're talking about now, and the method of kundalini yoga, which works with breath control and pran, with energy systems, with pranic systems. And that is all done in order to move the energy to various chakras. Traveling, for example, as I was around the world with Swami Muktananda, who has this capacity to give Shaktipat, direct energy, I've sat in a room where suddenly somebody gets up and dances who didn't expect to dance. You know, a rotund gentleman in a dark blue serge suit in Melbourne, Australia, for example. And he gets up and starts to do incredible Indian dance, right? And the man next to him, who looks just like a professor with a tweed jacket and a pipe sitting out of his mouth, starts to do mudras, but exquisite, perfect mudras. But the look on his face is one of total perplexity. Okay? And so on. Somebody else is doing automatic breathing and bouncing across the floor. And the whole place begins to look like a back ward of a mental hospital. And Swami Muktananda is just sitting up there playing his ektara with his eyes closed. And what is happening is he's like a beam of energy. And he's activating the kundalini, the energy in people. It's called giving of Shakti. And what happens is the energy starts to come up in the person, and wherever a center is blocked, let's say it gets up to the second center and can't get any further, or the third center and can't get any further, it comes out in a certain behavioral manifestation. Or if a little of it gets blocked here and more gets there, it comes out in another one. And there's a ditto chart of the 26 manifestations or whatever it is. And they're all very straightforward. This one will get up and dance, that one will do breathing, this one will do that, that one will pass out, that one will whatever. And he passes out the sheets, you know. You can keep score of who's got which chakra things. Eh? Now, what happens is the energy is hitting against it's like a water going up a tube, and then it gets to a crimp in the tube, and it's got to, because of the pressure, it's got to go out. And people working with energy attempt to open their chakras by forcing against that. Psychedelics does a similar process of forcing or overriding existing structures, because it's a fallacy to think of these chakras as physical things, even though it is the sushumna, or this thing which would seem to be like in the middle of the spinal column. It isn't really the hole in the middle of the spinal column. It's really an astral entity, the sushumna and the ida and pingala, the nerves that go down the spine. It's not nerves that you can, in anatomy, dissect. And when you're working within these energy systems, you might be given a certain mantra, a bij sound for opening a certain mantra. Ram, 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 ram. We'll work on a certain mantra, right? And you're given by a diagnostician a certain mantra, or a certain visualization exercise, a certain, like in Tibetan work, a mandala to work with. Which level you hear them at makes a lot of difference as to how useful it will be to know all that stuff. If you recall the systems we've been talking about, I'm trying to keep it simple, you recall that we have the indriyas or senses, and then there's the manas or the lower mind, which is pretty much connected to these senses and sort of thought. Then right above that is this thing called the ahamkara, which is the ego constellation of associative thought. Then above this is a thing called the buddhi, which is on a pivot and that buddhi is like the higher intellect. It's not intellectual, it's the higher knower, if you will, K-N-O-W-E-R. And that can turn inward towards the Atman, or it can turn down out into the senses. And for most people, everything is sense and thought-oriented, and they're just totally in the world. But as you get this higher wisdom we've been talking about, either through sneaking up through your lower manas, or through direct experience of the touching of the buddhi, which is called the soul, you begin to experience your connection to this Atman, or this light, or the Brahman, or whatever, however you want to call it. And at that point, the buddhi tends to want to go up or in more, and there's a pull in you to start to get on with it. That's what you're doing at Naropa. I mean, you could be a lot of other places this summer. Whatever kind of crazy thing it is that got you to go through all you had to go through to get here, that's what I just talked about, right? That's it. Now, depending on how you hear your individual differences, if you hear them with your lower mind, you're like another psychologist, for example. And all you're doing is hearing an intellectual structure, and then you're going to try to analyze what ought I to do about it, and you'll try to do it intellectually. But the thing we talked about earlier, which was the development of intuition, that becomes the way in which you work with these individual different systems in order to figure out what your dharma is. You don't figure it out. You tend to sense it. Get very mystical, right? As long as you are caught very much in worldly stuff and you're just busy with your senses and desires and thoughts and am I going to make it and what do I do now, you can't really use any systems at all because they're just going to feed into your neurosis. They're just going to feed your anxiety and your fear. They're not going to help you a hell of a lot. You might as well forget it and go swimming, you know. See? So it turns out that you finally realize that you have to do a lot of purification first before you're quiet enough to be able to hear what the trip is about. Because I know that somebody will come in and ask me something and I'll tell them and they can't hear it because they're too busy thinking. You know, they can't hear it because they can't quiet down enough to hear it. So that a lot of what we turn out to have to do at the stage of the game where we think we are, right, is we just have to do what's called purification. And that's something that Arjuna already pretty much has out of the way, and that's why the Gita doesn't make such a big deal about it. Because Arjuna was already a very sattvic person. But we have to get sattvic. And I'll explain about the gunas in a second. But what I'm suggesting is that you can't expect, for example, you go to a Trungpa lecture and you will hear something coming out that is so light and eerie and spacious and easy. But somehow between when he had it and when you get it, something went wrong, you know? Because you don't end up being as spacious and free and easy as he is saying it when you end up thinking about it. Because who's thinking about it is different than what it was that it was said through. Okay? So part of our process is to calm down enough to be able to receive the information. It's all available. There are no secrets in the game. Okay? People say, well, you're going to give it a mantra, don't tell anybody, as if we got all these secrets. You're joining the club now. You join like in the fraternity. I had a secret initiation at college when I joined the fraternity, and I was given a password and a secret handshake for about $500. The reason that mantras are given secretly is because at the level of flickery faith you are when you get a mantra, if you run it through a few cynical heads, you won't have anything left. See? You go home and you say to somebody who you've been living with, hey, I got this groovy mantra. And you say, it's like my name is Ram Dass. See, and Maharaji said his name is Ram Dass. See, and Ram Dass is so euphonious, Ram Dass. And it came from the beyond, it's who I'll be. And I take it and it's a sacred vessel. And I go home and pretty soon everybody's calling me Rammed Ass and Rum Dum, with great love. I mean, it's great love in a certain way, but they're not respecting, and it's like, can I afford it, Pretty soon I think, well, I'll just be Dick, it's easier. Because you just don't want to, it's the image I never like is the one about pearls, and it's too ugly. But sometimes it's good to keep your mouth shut about what you're doing. Unless people, and the Gita reminds us that a couple of times, don't lay the trip on people that aren't ready to hear. The game is to become your trip so much that other people will just come at you, let me in, let me know how to say Ram Dass, but you don't come lay your trip.